or so, I'm going to be with a special guest, Doug Powell, great apologist, wonderful apologist. And we're going to be talking about something very different for this channel, very, very different, which is the Shroud of Turin. Turin? You know. And we're going to discuss it and kind of ask, can we make a case for it? Is what we're gonna do here. And okay, I see it. So this isn't the promo. This looks like this will be actually the actual show. I was running a test, and it looks like it worked better than I thought. So actually, we might need to just stay right here. And guys, I'm gonna play the intro. We have not went live in a hot minute, so this will be an exciting time. Okay, everything's set up. Actually, that's the promo. Let me start the intro, and I'm gonna bring up Doug Powell, and we are gonna talk about the Shroud of Turin together. Is it authentic? If you don't know what it is, you definitely want to check this out. Very, very interesting show. Countdown to the intro begins now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Doug Powell, it looks like we're live, ready to go, and everything is set up, and I think you're loud enough. Boom! How you doing today?
I'm good. How's it going, Vocab?
Awesome, awesome. Let me take a look here at the live chat. I got some moderators coming in, especially my friend Nate2D2. Will you see if this is broadcasting on all of our various social media? I'm running some different software to try to fix some things. We haven't went live in a while. Let me know if it is, brother. And also, you guys let me know if you can hear us. And Nate, if everything's all clear, hit me up with a 1. And while you're doing that, we're gonna introduce Doug Powell, today's guest. Doug, you are one of my apologetic role models. There's a couple people I say that about, so it's not like you're the only one. But I really mean that, and I'll tell you why, Doug. In all seriousness, I love the way in your apologetic content and your approach, you blend your artistry and your creativity. You're a musician, you're a graphic designer, and you've managed to find a way to bring it into your apologetics. And I think that is an amazing thing. For example, I remember this is the first book I got by you, and I picked this up, and it seems it's a deceptively simple-looking book, but the content is actually amazing. This is no simple book, and I think this could actually be a great first apologetic book for somebody, because you just lay out so many things. It's fair, it's balanced, and the graphics are just lovely. I always like the glass slipper, one of the best graphics. I don't know, it's just always striking, and so. You got some great stuff there. And so also
well, thanks. Hey, just in case anybody goes looking for that book, it now looks like this.
Oh.
Okay. So they made it a little bit smaller, and it's the exact same book.
Okay.
But they just shrunk everything. So it's like all the same stuff, just super small.
Gotcha. Awesome. And the other thing I like is that you're reformed-ish, presuppositional-ish, but you managed to find a way to get along with a lot of people. In fact, one of your mentors is Gary Habermas, and you're going to be discussing some of his material on the Shroud of Turin today. What else do I need to say about you? That was sort of a casual intro, my friend.
I don't know. That was pretty good. That was more than I deserve, for sure.
Okay. DougPowell.com, correct?
Yes.
Do you still run the selfless defense site? I couldn't find it. I don't know if it's still up.
It just points to DougPowell.com.
Okay. All right. So DougPowell.com it is. And you have 15 or 16 apologetic works out?
It's something like that. Yeah, a lot of them are kind of small. They're like the print versions of apps. There's that, yeah. Now that book, it looks big and mighty, but it's only 16 pages because there's like pop-ups and stuff in it.
I know, it's the coolest thing ever. You got the medical chart here for Jesus' crucifixion. And of course, you managed to sneak in the man in the Shroud of Turin all the way back in this book. All right, Doug, what is the Shroud of Turin? And even that is going to be controversial. But you tell us. I am a skeptic, but I'm a friendly skeptic. And so my ears are yours, and you just tell me when you want to show your images, and my job is to serve you.
Well, you just tell me you're gonna have to guide me.
Okay.
There's so much to know and talk about in the Shroud of Turin, and that it's hard to know where to start, especially if people are coming at it brand new. But basically, it is a linen cloth that's about 14 and a half feet long and 3 3/4 feet wide, and it looks very old. It has tons of stains on it. There's blood and dirt and all sorts of things on it. But strangely enough, there is an odd uh, 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 figure in the cloth that looks like a man. And
Honestly, Doug, it sounds a little bit
yes,
so far like you're describing one of my old T-shirts. It's got blood and dirt and stains, and it appears very old. And there's an odd figure that looks sort of like a man. This is me in a shirt.
that's right.
No, but okay.
Well, here, I'll put it up on the screen. This is what it looks like. Okay, to the naked eye, and these strange triangles in it you can see that they're in pairs. So what these triangle things are, they're holes in the shroud. The shroud had been folded in half and then folded in half again and then folded in half one more time and set in a metal box for protection in a church that then caught on fire, and the box started to melt onto that corner, and it went all the way through. And so that's what those things are. So there's water stains on it. There's fire damage on it. And you can see there's lots of wear and tear on this thing and several other holes. But if you look right down the middle on the screen here, on the left half of that, you can see it more pronounced. There looks like a figure laying there. Can you see it? Hold on, let me go back. Can you see that, Vocab? I'm now all alone. I have taken total control over Vocab.
I muted
apparently.
myself so I wouldn't be distracting to you. But you have the total control of the screen. So right now is the image on the screen, and just a second ago I saw your face. But people can hear my voice.
Because I was looking for you.
Oh, well, I'm right here. I'm right here.
Okay, so but you can see what I'm talking about then. The holes, and then you can see the figure of the man over there on the left.
On the left side of the screen,
yes.
Is now
the figure is on both sides, and so if you look right in the center of the screen, what you're looking at is on the center left is the face, the front side of the body, and the head is top of the head is right in the middle of the cloth. And then on the right side of the cloth, as we're looking at it, is the back side of the body. So the sheet has been draped over. It's like it's been draped over a body, over the head, like you're going to dress up like a ghost, kind of a thing.
Oh, like Charlie Brown, Halloween special.
It's exactly right. It's very Charlie Brown, and this is what people looked at and knew as the Shroud for most of its history. Now, that history is debated, so that's another thing we're going to have to talk about. But this is what started to be displayed in Europe in the 14th century. And it became very popular, drew a whole lot of people to come see it, and it was believed to be the burial cloth of Jesus. And then through just various just situations of the people who owned it. It was owned by a French knight. When he died, it goes to his wife, and then their family starts to need money, and she sells it to the King of Savoy, which is the southeast part of France and northwest part of Italy. And the King of Savoy is passed it down to his heirs until 1983. And when he dies, he bequeaths it to the Roman Catholic Church. But it's kept in a church in Turin, Italy, which was the capital of Savoy. And so So that's why it's called the Shroud of Turin. Hasn't always been in Turin, but most of the time we've known about it, it's been in Turin. And when it is on display, which is very infrequently, then this is what you go see. I mean, you got to stand like, the closest you can get is maybe 10 or 15 feet, and it's elevated, and so
you got to practice. High up, and you got to practice social distancing.
It's very social distancing. So this is what it looked like. But in 1898, it was being exhibited, and it was photographed for the very first time. And for those of you too young to remember what cameras actually used to be like, they weren't on your phone. They were these boxes that had film inside, and you had to take a picture and hope you got it right. You couldn't see it instantly unless it was a Polaroid. You had to go get it developed, and when you got it developed, the first thing that happens is the film records the negative of the image. And so this guy in 1898 photographed it for the first time, and he was in his dark room, and he developed the negative, and it looked like this. Okay, that is very startling, because it's so dramatically different than what you see in the naked eye. And all of a sudden you see a figure, a very clear figure of a man on the left side there, and then the back side of that man on the right. And this was revolutionary to bring out the image with such clarity here. And if you zoom in on the face, here's the difference between the naked eye on the left and what it looks like as a negative on the right. Now, one of the fascinating things about this is that when you look at the negative turns the image positive. So when you're looking at the shroud with the naked eye, it's a negative image of the man in the shroud. And when you make a negative image of the shroud, it turns the image positive, which is what you see on the right. Now, almost immediately, you could see why people think it might be Jesus, because of just of our conception of what Jesus would look like. So what you're looking at here on this close-up, these very bright spots that you see, like the kind of the shape of the letter 3 with a little drop coming down, that is blood that is on the cloth, and there is blood all over this cloth. If I go back to the full view here, you can, if you look over on the left side and on his arms, you can see these kind of stripes going down. Actually, let me go here. You can see a lot of these brighter spots you're looking at are blood. If you look at the front side of the figure on the left, you see a larger splat of blood on the wrist area, and you see trails of blood running up the forearm. Now, the interesting thing about that is the blood is running from the wrist back toward the elbow, and it's at a kind of an angle, and that angle matches if you were to put your arms in this position, then the blood is going from here trailing down that way. So the blood is trailing in the way it would in a crucifixion victim. There is, if you look at on the left side of the image, that inner triangle there on the left side of his body, there is kind of this odd white patch right in his chest. That would be right in the area of where the spear wound would be if this were Jesus in the shroud. And that is that stain there is composed of blood and pleural edema. And pleural edema is the fluid that builds up in your lung when you are asphyxiating. And so that is consistent with somebody who is being crucified. Part of the way in which they're suffering is they are asphyxiating. And then you see all these kind of striations, both on the front and the back. and there are over 200 of them on the front, over 100 of them, over 100 on the front and over 200 on the back. And these are scourge wounds, it looks like. In fact, here, we got a wound map here. This is courtesy of our buddy Gary Habermas here. So you can see on the right side, I've got scourge marks marked out, and these are little barbell-shaped wounds that these little lead weights tied on the end of leather thongs that get slapped onto that are being whipped onto the body. You can see the areas of blood I've marked out. There's blood on the scalp, particularly around the back, in an odd pattern, really. There's abrasions on the shoulder. And that can come from the carrying a crossbeam or from scraping up and down on the cross as the man being crucified is trying to breathe. You can see that the arms over on the left side, you can see one of the labels that the arms are elongated. Look how long his arms are. They almost look kind of alien. And that is consistent with how a crucifixion victim's arms would be dislocated at the shoulders once the weight is fully on the nails when the cross is moved erect. So at that point, you kind of think common sense says you're going to pull yourself up in order to breathe. But in crucifixion, really the arms nailed to the cross are just keeping you from flopping forward because your arms are dislocated. You can't have any leverage. So you have to push up on the nails going through the feet or the ankles. And you can see there are nail wounds and blood down there in the feet area. There's bruises on the knees that are consistent with falling down on the way carrying the cross. One of the interesting labels here says no thumbs. It doesn't mean that Jesus or whoever this is was born without thumbs, but as best as the experiments can show, a nail through the wrist damages the nerve in such a way that the thumb turns inward and on the cross. And so what you're looking at there isn't that the man in the image has no thumbs. It's that the thumbs aren't visible because they're turned in because of the wound. So you can see there are a lot of wounds that are consistent on the shroud with what we would expect to see on Jesus's body. And that's why this is thought to be Jesus in the image. So got any questions on that? Vocab?
Yeah. I got a lot of
okay,
questions
go.
here.
Hit me.
All right, let me switch over here so we can both be seen here. And there's a couple
and tell me if you want me to return to any of the images.
Okay, I will. I appreciate that. And there's actually a couple different decent questions even in the live chat. So guys, we will try to get to some of your things you had to say in the live chat. Just have patience and we'll try to get to it there. Okay. Sorry about that. Two in a row that time. Okay, and I'm gonna have to reposition my camera and everything. But the Shroud of Turin, let me give some unformed kind of objections, but I think there's something you might hear by some people, and I think you could have something to say. What if I just saw what you did and I've seen, and I say, I don't know, this just seems very medieval to me. Just seems very kind of European superstition-y to me. Everything you say about it, from the name to the way it looks, it doesn't seem very first century Jerusalem-y to me. Am I wrong? Mm-hmm. Let's say somebody said something like that.
All right. Well, I guess I would ask what your criteria was. What's your criteria for first century Jerusalem?
It's in Italy. The first time we hear about it, it's with these European folks. It comes out of an era where people were venerating ancient relics and objects, supposedly. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get that. Now, the whole veneration of relics that was especially popular during the Middle Ages is definitely a problem. And for now, I'm Presbyterian. We don't have hardly any relics. We've got Calvin's relics. We love Calvin. We love Van Til. I'm just joking. We don't have their relics. We don't venerate them. But
you got Van Til's pen.
But if there were, even if there were a Van Til shroud, we would not be venerating it. But the veneration of relics is something that's foreign to me. It's distasteful to a lot of people today. Within the Roman Catholic Church, there's a much stronger tradition, and in Eastern Orthodoxy. So the difference is to lump this in with the other relics. It's a different kind of a thing. In fact, one of the fascinating things about the shroud is that when it is studied, a lot of the people who study it are not people who believe, who are Christians. They're the most rigorous study that's been done on it happened in 1978. It's called the Shroud of Turin Research Project. They just call it STURP. And the STURP team had over 24 members on it. Some of them were Christian. Some of the Christians didn't believe this was authentic. There's also a Jewish, at least one Jewish man on it, and he took the picture I just showed. Barry Schwartz is his name, and he believes it is Jesus, but he is not a Christian. There were also atheists on the team. There was a spectrum of people investigating this thing, and so the best way to start thinking of the shroud isn't as a religious relic. It's as an artifact to be studied scientifically and see where that leads. Okay. And that's what these guys did. And the best explanation for about 20 or so of the different lines of study that they did is that this is a 1st century artifact. And what they see in it corresponds with what they know about Jesus's crucifixion, whether or not they believe it's Jesus, let's say you can conclusively show it's Jesus. It doesn't necessarily mean that Christianity is true. Okay, so you don't lose anything if you're predisposed against Christianity. It's not going to, Christianity, the truth of it does not stand or fall on whether this is an authentic burial shroud from the tomb of Jesus. So the man in the shroud is distinctly Semitic or Jewish. What do you mean by that when you say he's distinctly Semitic? He's Jewish. Okay, he looks Jewish. It's a Hebrew man. There is
how do we know that?
Well, aside from the features that we see associated with, just in general, he looks like he falls into that Jewish look in the sense that he's got this very long, full beard, almost like a ZZ Top beard. And he's got this
one
long
thing about
hair.
That. I don't want to interrupt too much,
Yeah.
but one thing you would say by that is that's not. You said this to me earlier. You said, and that wouldn't be very Greco-Roman, or you made a comment about the beard specifically. The ZZ
Right.
Top. What did you say?
The long beard. He's got this long beard in a time in Europe in the 1st century Europe. You have the clean shaven faces and the short cropped hair. That's what the European or the Roman Empire fashion was, but that's not what the Jews. That was not their fashion. Their fashion was almost completely antithetical to that, almost like punk rockers, where you're just trying to poke the eye of the establishment. They had the long hair, they had the beards. It was exactly opposite of what Rome was trying to look like.
But what about this? What if someone says this? Yeah, but this could just be a medieval recreation of what they thought a 1st century Jew would have looked like.
Yeah, well, it could, but it doesn't. It doesn't account for all the other features on the shroud. For example, the blood that is on it is the blood type AB. Now, the blood type AB is common in the Middle East, but it's not common in Europe. Now, a medieval European forger is not going to know that.
Right.
Another thing that is an interesting feature of the shroud is that there is pollen on it, trapped in the fibers. And when that pollen has been examined, they're able to identify pollen from around the northern Italy and France, but also Constantinople and Turkey in general, and also Palestine and Jerusalem in particular. There isn't that wasn't the kind of knowledge somebody in the Middle Ages would have had if they were trying to forge it or create some kind, not even forge in a bad way. Let's say they were just trying to create a picture of Jesus in some way, and they're not going to go collect a bunch of pollen and put it on there. They wouldn't have known to have done such a thing. Right. There is dirt on the shroud, particularly around Jesus's or the man on the shroud's feet and knees, and that is has the limestone and the dirt from that is particular to the area around Jerusalem. And again, that's not something that somebody in the Middle Ages is going to even think about. They're not even going to consider doing that. Even if they were trying to create a forgery, that's not something that would even occur to them to do. So there are a number of reasons just in the scientific investigation that point to it being first century and from Jerusalem or the Palestine era. The one thing that is the big objection is that there seems to not be. You'd think that such an important artifact from Christianity would be very well provenance, that you could trace its history pretty certainly from the crucifixion all the way to the time we have it now. But the argument is that it just kind of shows up out of nowhere in the 1300s, and people are like, well, there doesn't seem to be any place that it was before this, and there are some lines of evidence that do support a history before it showed up in France, and there are different traditions that and legends that we can talk about that fit into that actually end up telling the story of the pollen that we see. The pollen corresponds to the areas in the legends where the legends say that the shroud was. And another fascinating thing is when you tie that what these legendary accounts or these other traditions about the burial shroud of Jesus, which of course wouldn't have been called the Shroud of Turin before it got to Turin, which is one of the areas of confusion.
What were the names, and how do we know the names are identifying the same object?
Well, we don't know 100%. All we know is it makes best sense of the story. So the traditions, if you kind of cull them down to one thread, and there's variations within this thread, it goes like this. There was a king in what we call, now in modern day Urfa, Turkey, it's Edessa is the ancient name for this city. And there was the king of Edessa was suffering some kind of medical condition, and he'd heard about Jesus. And so he sends somebody to go get Jesus to bring him back to Edessa to heal him. And Jesus doesn't go, but he writes a letter to the king and says, I can't come. I will send somebody to you. And then Jesus is crucified, and then I believe it's Thomas has the shroud, and he gives it to Thaddeus or Adai, and they take it, and he's one of the 70 disciples that had been sent out, and Adai takes it to Edessa and gives it to the king, and the king is healed, and the whole town becomes converted to Christianity. Now, let me tell you,
that letter's from Eusebius, right? That's where we find it.
Yes, that letter is
the
in
earliest church
Eusebius.
historian.
Yeah, and it is written on a wall around Edessa as well, in one of the tombs there. But nobody's ever seen the actual letter itself. Now, I believe that the letter, there you go, ecclesiastical history, Eusebius. Now, Eusebius gets there before the shroud has been rediscovered. So what happens is Abgar becomes a believer. It's a pagan town until this time. So he takes the shroud, he folds it up and puts it in a box and cuts a window in it so you can see the face through the window, and he sets it over the gate, the western city gate. And that's where the idols, the pagan idols, had been set up that you were to worship when you entered town. And now the pagan idols are gone, and this is set up there, and it's referred to as the Mandilion. Okay, so the Mandilion is sitting there, and Agbar's son is a believer, so the Mandilion is still there, and then Agbar's grandson becomes king, and he reverts to paganism, and the bishop of the town thinks that the burial shroud, the Mandilion, is in danger, and so he bricks it up. He walls it up to protect it. And then 300 or 400 years later, the Edessa comes under siege. And the bishop at that time says, he receives a vision saying, go get the Mandilion out of the wall. I'll show you where it is. He gets the Mandilion out of the wall. And then the Mandilion helps him find a hole in the ground where they can they dig in and find the Persian soldiers and defeat them that way. And then everyone reveres the cloth again. So the Mandilion is also known as the image of Edessa. Now, a lot of that story, I think, is very legendary. I don't believe Jesus wrote a letter or anything like that. And there's variations on that story, but in general, that is how the cloth gets from Jerusalem to Edessa. Interestingly enough, well, I'll come back to this. So it stays in Edessa for 300 or 400 years, and then the Byzantine emperor says, hey, we need all the cool stuff over here in Constantinople, and then they come and get it. And so it's taken to Constantinople, where it's on display for about 300 years until the Fourth Crusades. And in the Fourth Crusades, that's when the Crusaders got, they never really made it to Jerusalem. They just stopped in Constantinople. And this was after the Great Schism. And so you had the Eastern Church and the Western Church, and the Western Church, the Crusaders, sack Constantinople and take it over. And that's when a lot of these relics that had been collected by the Byzantine emperors, that's when they disappear, including the image of Edessa or the Mandilion. 150 years later is when it first appears in France. And it's there are people who have traced a possible connection between the man who first displays it and various crusaders who were then given different administrative duties in Athens, Greece, for example, who might have had the shroud but kept it hidden because you had the Roman Catholic Church didn't allow the exhibition of relics without their permission, and it's possible that it was in the possession of the Templars, who were on the outs at the time. Okay,
so wait,
eventually
the Knights Templar are actually involved in a potential paper trail for this thing?
There is a possible connection to the Templars, and I hate doing that because the Templars are like the boogeymen for everything.
Yeah,
okay,
I'm just saying it's that's where I'm saying this sounds like, I'm just, to a skeptic, it's parts of it sound like a Christian version of the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, I know it. But
hold on real quick.
A
couple people asked this book. Everyone, this book is not about the subject today. Let me clarify. I held it up. It's Eusebius. Eusebius is known as our first official sort of church historian. Now, of course, that's not counting Luke. So understand, we mean non-canonical. Now, there were some before him, but we don't have their writings, although he preserved some of their writings, like Julius Africanus. And so this is a fascinating work. It's very important. Is everything in it perfect? No. In fact, the letter supposedly by Jesus to King Akbar, neither of us, Doug nor I, think is authentic, but it's interesting, some of the traditions. And then there's more authentic things closer to his time, of course. So Eusebius, Ecclesiastical History, there's different versions you can get of it. But I would encourage you to at least own a copy and understand who Eusebius is, everybody. So that's what that is. Back to you, Doug.
All right, Eusebius, we give it the thumbs up.
That's right.
He's a good guy. We like him. So as far as the possible Templar connection, when the Templars, may have possession of the shroud during this 150-year period, or at least for some part of that period, but they're outlawed at a certain point in the 13th century. And when Jacques de Molay is executed, he is executed with another guy, one of his chief deputies, and that chief deputy was named Geoffrey de Charnay. Now, about 50 years later is when the shroud is first displayed in France. And you know who the guy who owns it and displays it is named Geoffrey de Charnay. Now, probably not a son or a grandson, because the Knights Templar were monks, and they shouldn't have kids. Right. So maybe a relative there. It's pretty odd. Okay, now there's a slight variation in their names, whether there's an extra A in the Charnay or not, but this is an age of non-standardization, and so you see both names spelled both ways. So it's a pretty interesting connection there. The Geoffrey de Charnay who owns the shroud and displays it for the first time is married to someone whose relative was in the Fourth Crusades and became the governor of Athens afterwards. So it may have been handed down through that way too. One other thing is, in the I think it was the 40s or so, or early 50s, there was a building in Templecombe, England, that after a strong wind, part of the ceiling fell down, and it was part of the ceiling that was able to it exposed the underside of the roof. And this was a very old building, and on the underside of the roof, there was the painting of a man's face. It looks almost identical to the Shroud of Turin. It turns out this building was used as a training center by the Knights Templar. And the Knights Templar were known, part of their secret ritual was to worship a sacred head. And this thing might be a depiction of that sacred head, and it matches up with the Shroud of Turin pretty closely. It's pretty interesting. So you take the tradition, and it matches up with the general trajectory of the tradition, matches up with the pollen evidence. And then when you plug that in to what's called the iconographic theory, it's pretty interesting. Okay, before about the mid 500s, the depiction of Jesus happened a bunch of different ways. There was no standardized depiction in the catacombs and the paintings that we see of Jesus. He's often beardless, short-haired, looks like a young boy.
Yeah. The earliest ones I've seen, he has shorter hair, has a youthful face, like you're saying, no beard, right? And a lot of times it's sort of portrayed in sort of shepherd imagery, and some of the earliest ones. But I think that's more a result of sort of Greco-Roman understanding of something than probably Jesus' actual look.
Right. Yes, exactly. So that is a great way to set this up, because what happens after the recovery of the Mandilion from the city wall in Edessa, which was in the mid 500s, 545, I think, around there. After that, almost immediately after that, all the images of Jesus look the same. Almost there's a dramatic uniformity, as if all of a sudden there was a standard by which they used as an exemplar for what Jesus should look like. So here's a bunch of icons.
What date was that again? And what are the date of these icons? This is interesting. I'm trying to follow this. Can you explain that one more time?
In about 537, I believe, I'm sorry, 545 was when Edessa became went through that siege and came through with the discovery of the image in the wall. Okay, the recovery of the image of Edessa happens in 544. That's the siege. Okay, 544 is the siege of Edessa, and almost immediately, the way that the icons are painted changes. And here's a bunch of them right here. And you can see they almost all look like the same thing, but there's like a 300 or 400 year different spread here, but it goes all the way back to within about 20 years of the discovery of the image at Edessa.
Which one is do you know which of these icons, Gary? Sorry, Doug. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Do you know which one of these?
That's right.
I'm thinking of our friend. Which one is the oldest one, and how?
Yeah,
how
the
far
top
back?
right corner. The top right corner, which is the best painting of the batch anyway. The top right corner is. I'll show this in a minute, but that is from the. St. Catherine Monastery in the Sinai Peninsula, and it's from about 560 or so, 550, 560. It's way, way back there. And the monks believe that it was painted directly from the shroud as the example. Now, one of the things you can see, if you look at all the images, if you start comparing them, you can see they share a whole lot of similar features here. And let's see, for the people who've examined this thing, some people see, 7 or 8 really key features that are all shared. Some see dozens. But if you look at closely at the central the picture of the shroud right in the middle, you can see that between the eyes, there's this furrowed brow. There's this triangle in between them. You look around at all the icons, it's there in every one. There's this strange line underneath his chin, and you can see it's there in the others. There's a forked beard. Looks like a forked beard. It's not really a forked beard, but it looks like a forked beard in the shroud. And you can see it's replicated in most of the other images there. You can see that there's this stain on the top of his torso there that is then interpreted as the top of his garment in all these images. And look at the shape of it. It's the same in all of those. It's fascinating. So there are, like I said, depending on which person is doing the counting, at least 7 or 8, sometimes a couple of dozen of these. So that led to somebody. Well, first of all, the best explanation of that is all of a sudden there is an image that people are recognizing as an authoritative depiction of Jesus's face, and they're trying to match it. That makes the best sense for what we see. Whether or not they were right that it's authentic, there's something about the standard they're all using that makes them think this is the face of Jesus.
Could you leave those up for a second?
Sure.
One is, so it's sort of an argument from silence, isn't it? Meaning we don't have any evidence that there is sort of this general understanding of some kind of aesthetic regarding Jesus, but you're saying, well, these appear at the same time. Are there outliers and anomalies where the depiction of Jesus is not like these at all? And I'm worried also.
Yes, but
I'm worried it's power of suggestion. Like we're saying they look similar, but they're really not really. I don't know. But what was that's too many questions at once. The first thing you're saying there are outliers, but
Yes, it is uniform, but it is but you don't see the variety, the diversity that you did before the recovery of the image of Edessa. And not only is there a strange uniformity, but they share so many features. They don't all like kind of look alike. There's like despite the variety of the examples on the screen right here, the features that they contain are unique. That are uniform. I'm sorry, they're unique to the image of the shroud and are also seen in these icons, and that's hard to explain if they weren't using the shroud and if they didn't think the shroud was somehow the depiction of Jesus.
What about you may not be able to answer this, but I'm thinking of various objections. What if someone says, and I'm not saying that's your intention, but what if someone says, this just seems like a fancy way to try to give some proof for a white Jesus, because this looks like a white Jesus to me. Let's say somebody said that. Would you disagree? What would be your response if someone says, this just seems like someone's propping up like white Jesus, and I thought white Jesus wasn't accurate? You know, that kind of thing.
Well, I 100% think that white Jesus is not accurate.
Right.
But the icons that we're looking at, most of them aren't done in white cultures. These are most of them are Middle East. They're from the Byzantium, so they're found in Turkey and Syria and places like that. Despite how they look, they're not trying to do photographic representation. So I wouldn't put a ton on the skin pigment color here, because I don't think that's the intention that they're going for. So
what about the nose? So the nose, you're saying he has a Semitic look. Is that a standard phenotype for a Semitic look? Like this, in some of these, like the one on the top left, not the one on the top right with the Jesus with the two different pupil, his pupil's bigger on one, not that one. The other one on the far left, that nose is super thin. It's like a little straw. You know what I'm saying? Does that seem Semitic? I don't know.
Well,
and those tiny little lips.
I'm not going to go to bat on that. I am not an expert on it, and I certainly don't want to say anything that could be taken as racially insensitive.
Well, I don't mean that. I just mean more a phenotype that looks European. I'm not saying I know what you're saying, and I respect that. And I'm trying to give sort of common everyman objections a little bit.
Sure.
And I know there's going to be a concern, especially within urban apologetics and that kind of context, to say, well, this could look just like propping up a white Jesus, and someone might point to the nose and like, look how tiny that is. This seems like a little pretty European nose. I'm just saying. Now, see, this seems very subjective, so I feel weird saying it, but we're looking at art, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what to do. How to answer that. You're looking at the nose straight on there, so who knows what the actual shape of it is.
Who knows?
There you go. See, I did that totally on purpose for you. But we don't. What noses are like that? They're like fins. If you have a highlight on going down the center of your nose, that's what it looks like. It looks thin. So I don't know how else it would be depicted, really.
And again, I mean, I'm sorry for sort of those kinds of things. I'm just trying to really. I can imagine. I know what there's different types of people who watch this show, and I want to make sure those kinds of things.
Sure. If that was the only, if this was the only line of argument, it would be stronger, I think. But the fact that it's more of a cumulative case. Okay, when you add the pollen on top of the uniqueness of the wound, on top of the traditions that we see. It becomes more and more persuasive. So the width of the nose carries less and less weight the more you consider the whole of everything, is how I'd go with that. And for those who don't really see, if you're like, okay, so I can see correspondence between all the icons, but it's a little tough to see the correspondence with the shroud. Let me pull up the oldest icon. This is called the Pantocrator of Sinai. This is the oldest one. It's dated to about 20 years or so from the discovery of the image of Edessa in the city wall. So what happened? The reason why this image is important is not just because it is the oldest image of Pantocrator, which is Christ enthroned. Okay, Jesus enthroned as the ruler of the world. That's the Pantocrator part of that. It's not just the oldest example of a Pantocrator icon. As such, there was a shroud researcher from North Carolina who, in the 70s, thought, I wonder if you took a picture of the shroud and a picture of the Pantocrator and overlay them, what would happen? How well would they match up? And so, this back in the 70s. So he took slides of each and he put them each in a different slide projector and put them right on the same spot in the wall. And he put polarizing filters on each one and then looked through with a third polarizing filter in order to pull out exact congruences. And he found I think it was over 150 points of congruence between this image and the Shroud of Turin. And it's very hard to explain if it wasn't intentional. It makes more sense to think that this was painted based on the shroud than it just being accidental. So I've done an overlay in Photoshop, and it looks like this. Okay, now.
Could you do that again? Okay, I'm trying to. Okay,
yeah, I'm going back and forth. Okay, so there's the Pantocrator, and there's the shroud. I did not do any Photoshop doctoring here. This is a particular filter that just accentuates all the differences. It subtracts everything that's the same and kind of accentuates the difference. And you can see what it looks like is that it almost colors in things. Look at the eyebrows. They get colored right in. The hairline matches perfectly. Look at the top of the garment that the painting is wearing. It hits right on that weird stain. The beard hits, the mouth hits, the eyes hit. It's pretty startling. The hair goes right around those ears perfectly. And so I just to make sure this wasn't like some kind of seeing whatever you want in the clouds type of thing, I have put this I've done an overlay with other people, including Gary Habermas, and it doesn't match. It doesn't match.
Oh, that doesn't quite look like me there, Doug. I don't think that really looks like me, Doug.
Hey, that's a pretty good imitation of Habermas.
Yeah, so your look, there's 4 points here when discussing. The first one, minimal facts, is the shroud had like 1,000 million gigawatts of energy it would have taken to create, so that's not possible. Okay.
Oh, that is funny. Has he ever heard you do that?
No, I just came up with it now. The only my main interaction with Gary Habermas was David Wood was running around ETS with a camera, right? And we're out on the bookseller's floor. And Gary comes up, and we're kind of having a conversation, and David's like, hey, freestyle to Gary about Gary. And so I just said some dumb stuff, free, like off the top, kind of lame rapping. But he seemed to enjoy it. We had a little bit of fun with it, so that was kind of our main interaction. I think we ate one time, but the table had like 20 people on it. So, I wasn't, he didn't say, pass the salt there, vocab. There wasn't anything like that. But I do like Gary.
Do you do any impressions of other apologists? Like, do you do Wayne Grudem?
You know what's funny? I had Grudem in class for years. I went to Phoenix Seminary.
Know, that's
yeah. So
you should have that one.
I should have a Grudem, but I don't have a Grudem. I had some of my other professors. Now you're making me dip into the memory bank. I'll have to think about this. But okay. Well,
the overlay thing seems to have been pretty compelling for a lot of people, and the iconographic theory, that's what we call this. There's been a lot written about it. because it is so difficult to explain. It's not necessarily an argument from silence. Uh, I mean, there's like no document going, okay, everybody, here's the memo. The new standard for icons is we're going to make it look like a shroud. Okay.
Right.
That's what you'd have to find to satisfy, somebody saying this is an argument for silence. What the real silence is why. I mean, there's no argument, explanation for why this should be the case. Why should this happen at all? So,
well, I mean, it could be that there. I mean, it's not impossible that there's a lot of coincidences. I guess the question is, does a person find that there's so many coincidences it gets into strong circumstantial evidence versus, hey, I can't explain everything about this. I'm still skeptical because of reasons X, Y, Z, and there could be some coincidences there. I don't know if you're ready to transition, but I do want to transition at some point about the actual creation and perhaps possible recreation of the image, because I feel like we haven't really got to that, and I know that's going to be important, but I don't know if you want to leapfrog to that yet as far as actually what would it take to have this be created. But I'll let
Can I do one more thing first?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's why I wanted to make sure you're able to set your own pace. But I think that's very important, and I see people asking the live chat as well. And Israel 144, just so you know, and to everyone else listening, and I'm gonna let Doug continue on. Let me address the live chat briefly here. I am not saying that I think this is true or accurate. I do think that Doug makes a compelling case, and it's very interesting and fascinating to hear. Okay, so I'll say that, right? But there's still a lot of questions, but I at least want to talk about it because it's in this broad realm of sort of archaeological apologetics, perhaps, right? And so that's all I'm discussing. And I've tried to sort of ask specific questions about, sort of the look of it and what that means or doesn't mean. So I just want people to understand that. I respect Doug and Gary very much, and obviously he knows a lot about it. But I'm kind of just listening and try to ask questions. But okay, I'm going to flip over the screen again, and then what did you want to continue on with next there, Doug?
The last thing, this will be another. This is a Habermas right here. Habermas has a couple books on the shroud that he wrote with one of the guys on the Stirp team, and in one of the books he calculated the probability that this is Jesus. Okay, so this is kind of a minimal facts approach for that Gary did. So he, and I've talked to him about this recently, and he still goes to bat for these, these statistics, and he tried to be very generous with the statistics as well, generous against the shroud. Okay. So not everybody was scourged. So let's say about half the guys who end up being crucified are scourged. So he gives it a 1 in 2 chance of happening. Crown of thorns, probably not a whole lot of people get a crown of thorns set on their heads, but let's say it happens every once in a while. So he put it at 1 in 400, and he goes on down the line. Okay, and the way statistics work is you take all the probabilities and you multiply them with each other, and the probability that Habermas ends up with is that there is, it's a 1 in 80, almost 83 million chance that it is anybody else but Jesus. So that's a pretty strong probability based on just those few things that we see on the shroud, and with very generous odds in favor of the skeptic.
Hold on just a second here. So no broken legs. We know that from the 3D aspect. How do we know there's no broken legs?
The man in the shroud has no broken legs.
But how can we tell that? I mean, I know in the Bible, obviously, it's Psalm 22 fulfilled and all that kind of stuff. But I'm saying, how do we know the man in the shroud doesn't have broken legs? Sorry if it's a dumb question.
The medical doctors who have looked at this do not see any evidence of any broken bones at all.
So we'd be able to tell? We'd be able to tell?
Yes. Yeah, because they can see contusions, for example, on his knees. So they can see bruises on his face. So they can detect contusions. They do not see any breaks.
Okay. Could you go back to that? So without ropes, we'd be able to tell if there was ropes? Because you said crucified without ropes. We'd be able to tell if there was?
You'd see rope marks, and there probably wouldn't be dislocated shoulders in the case of ropes.
Okay. I'm just trying to put all this together.
Okay.
The spear wound that you're saying, we're saying there's a wound that corresponds to that, correct? That we can see
Yes.
still. Buried in fine linen shroud. So do we know if the material, I'm sorry if you already covered this, I don't think you did. The actual material the shroud is made of, like we know it's like
is linen.
other ones?
We know it's linen.
Do we have a way to know where I know you mentioned pollen, do we have a way of knowing where the linen came from? Is that possible?
It's the linen. To the best of my knowledge, reading people who are like textile historians, this is not the kind of linen that was made in first century Europe, and it's not the kind of weave of linen that's found in first century Europe. It is the kind of linen and weave that you find in first century Middle East.
Do we have other good examples of burial cloths from first century crucifixion victims, though? Because I don't think we do. So how do we know what to compare it to? Are we just basing upon descriptions like in the Gospel of John, or how are we doing that?
There are lots of burial cloths that still exist, but they're mainly from mummies and mummy tombs.
Like in first century Egypt?
Predominantly where they're from, but they're not from crucifixion victims.
Okay. Because I thought the only really archaeological artifact we have for crucifixion victim is the guy who had the nail still stuck in his foot. Was it
right, Yohanan?
Yeah. And so this is an example, but it would match with. Well, we didn't really get into the head cloth, but that's a whole other thing. Maybe we can at the end, because someone mentioned that, John 27. But I guess we're saying the body cloth, we're saying matches. How do you know he was hastily buried, though, from this? How do we know that?
The hastily buried, from Scripture, they come back to complete the process.
Yes, but I mean in the shroud.
And in the shroud, there is some debate as to whether they would fully clean the body. The fact that he has as much blood on him as he does indicates that he has not been washed, which would indicate a hasty burial, because they had to get done, because of Sabbath. So they may be coming back to wash the body, or at least add spices. Whether the Jewish tradition allows for a violently executed man to have the corpse washed is a little bit up for debate. But at least the fact that he's got, blood still on him in the way that he does indicates that he was buried pretty quick after they got him down.
What about, so I know a first century crucifixion victim may not even be, wrapped in a burial cloth. I understand that, but other folks would be. Are there other burial cloths that even survive? Like, is it weird that this would even survive from the first century? Because it's somewhat complete. It looks like.
As far as I know, there are quite a few burial cloths out there, but like I said, most of them are going to be Egyptian. From my understanding, the weird thing about a Jewish burial cloth with a picture of a man on it is that there's a picture of a man on it, and they kept it. First of all, why would you keep a burial cloth of anybody? It would have to be somebody of like great note that you were trying to venerate if you were going to keep an artifact that just touched them. And in the Jewish context, where images of people are forbidden in the Ten Commandments, it's especially weird that Jewish followers of a Jewish teacher would see an image on a cloth and keep it, think that it would be okay to keep. And that indicates that there is something unique and special about this image and about this cloth. So the very fact that we have this thing in the first place is raises a lot of questions. Why, if this was some anonymous guy and not Jesus, then why would they keep the burial cloth? Why would anybody want to keep the burial cloth? And why especially would they want it if it has an image on it which is in violation of Jewish law?
Right, but Doug, isn't that assuming it's from the first century? We're saying somebody, why would they want to keep it? Well, what if no one did keep it? What if they recreated it in the 12th or 13th century? And it's not,
Yeah.
no one did keep it. It's not that someone kept it. That's when it was recreated. I understand what you're saying, but it's kind of assuming that it's from that era. And so that kind of gets into...
Which is why it's not the only line of evidence that's important. It's a cumulative case.
Right. Well, I know Gary likes those. I'm going to take a brick by brick era. It's like, imagine building a house. It's a little different methodology than I heard with other apologists. There's a brick. It's just one brick to consider. Maybe a pail. Okay, so what is the reason Doug Powell does not think, or anyone that finds this viable? What is the reason they do not think it's the product of essentially medieval Europe? I understand some of the reasons we've given so far, the type of linen, for example, but are we saying it could not have been created in the 12th or 13th century,
The 1978 Stirp team found no explanation for the image on the cloth. There's no pigment on it that contributes to the image. Okay, the image does not permeate the threads. Okay, a thread in linen has like 200 or 300 fibrils, tiny little threads that comprise each individual thread. The image is there's a chemical change only on the outermost fibrils of the outermost threads. So it's absolutely superficial. Any kind of pigment permeates and it gets absorbed into those fibrils and into the threads, and that is not a feature on there. There's also no pigment found on there. There's no there's no chemical change attributed to burns that are on there.
So you're
and not only that, but
like forensics, you're saying if it was recreated or if it was created this way, here's some things we would need to find, but we don't find them. Is that kind of what
right?
Okay.
If you were going to paint it, now there has been pigment found on the cloth, but that's because in the Middle Ages, once this was displayed and revered, there were copies made to be displayed other places, and in order to kind of like verify them or certify these copies, they would lay the copies on the shroud, and then it's blessed in that way, and then they take the copy and they'd go exhibit it somewhere else. So like in John Calvin's day, he writes a whole treatise on relics, and he talks about how there's 7 or 8 of these things around during his day, and he's aware of the Shroud of Turin, but and so there is pigment that comes on it that way. But the interesting thing is that pigment, kind of the incidental pigment, is found all over the shroud, or not all over, but I mean, not as in like it's not like covered in it, but it's found both on the parts where there's image and non-image. Okay, there's pigment in the non-image parts just as much as there is on the image parts. So the pigment that is there can't be used to explain the image. The image, some people think, well, maybe it was like a dry brush type of thing where you have powdered paint, like tempera, without any kind of liquid or binder in it, and you brush it on there. But then you're talking about little granules, almost like pollen, that get in between the threads and get absorbed by the thread again, and you don't see any of that on there. It doesn't show any signs of fluorescing like it would be if it was created by a burn, because some people have thought, well, what if you made a bronze statue and you heated it up and you put the cloth on there and it just kind of burned its way in, and then you picked it up before there was any sort of it burns through. Okay, that doesn't account for the image either. So some people think, well, maybe there was something on the body, and you put paint on a body, or somehow some stain or something on someone's body, and then you wrap the sheet around them, and then that contact is what makes the image. Well, it can't be created that way, because when the sheet bends around, envelops the body in order to make that kind of contact, it would be distorted once you flatten the image out again, right? So it would only look right if the form were underneath it, but once it gets flattened out right, the image would be distorted. And you don't see that on the shroud. In fact, the shroud has a three-dimensional quality to it, because the parts of the body that are closest to the cloth are a little bit in sharper focus than like the ear, or the parts of the body, the neck, that wouldn't be in contact with the shroud as it's overlaying it. So if you can take that black and white image and treat it as a bitmap, put it into an image analyzer, and it creates a three-dimensional image of the body that's underneath. That's not something that paintings can do. Right. And because of those things, the scientists came away knowing, completely convinced by all of the tests, that it was not created by human hands. There was no forgery involved in this whatsoever. But they couldn't explain how it happened. There's no natural process they can use to explain it. So they left empty-handed. And that's one of the reasons why, after 1978, they recommended more tests be done. And that's where the carbon dating test comes in. They were going to have a whole nother battery of a couple dozen tests that they were going to do. And one of them was going to be carbon dating. And then for whatever reason, the carbon dating got separated out as its own test that was going to be done in 1988. And the carbon 14 test came back and showed that it was from the Middle Ages, between about 1200 and 1350. And that is the primary reason people disbelieve in the shroud these days, is that particular test. So that particular test is seen as outweighing all the other tests and scientific and historic investigations that have been done. And yet there are a number of problems that have come to light about how that carbon dating test was done. What was agreed to is there were going to be 7 different samples taken from at least 3 different parts of the shroud and sent to 7 different radiocarbon dating labs around the world that use 2 different techniques in order to test the date, test the material, and that's what the church agreed to. That's what the scientists all recommended. And then when the time came, they allowed only 1 sample, not 7 samples, and not from. They only allowed 1 sample to be taken, and only from 1 location instead of 3 different locations. And they gave it to 3 different labs, and they each used the same technique to do it. And most importantly, when the test was agreed to, the scientists said, we'll pick out the 7 different places, or the 3 different places that we're going to take the 7 samples from, but the one place we're not going to take a sample from is from that bottom left corner, because that's the one that's obviously the most contaminated and the most likely to give a false reading. And lo and behold, that's where the 1 sample was taken from. And so not only was it taken from the most contaminated area of the shroud, it's been shown in a 2005 academic paper that it was taken by the chemist of the STURP team, that the sample that was taken wasn't even taken from the shroud. It was taken from a patch that was sewn on after a fire. So they didn't even date the actual linen that the image is on in the first place. So there's a number of reasons why to revisit the carbon 14. The one thing I want to make clear is that regardless of the date that came back, the scientists and the labs who did this, there was Oxford, University of Arizona, and Switzerland, I believe, there's nothing wrong necessarily. There's no conspiracy among these scientists or these labs to come up with a medieval date. They dated what they were given. The problem is in the data they were given, the material they were given, not in the tests, in the way in which they were conducted. Okay, there's no reason to doubt the integrity of these scientists. There is a lot of reason to doubt the way in which the sample was collected and treated.
Well, as far as the date, you've probably seen the guy. I don't know if you have much to say about it. If not, that's okay. Luigi Garlascelli. He says he's recreated it by wrapping a specially woven cloth over one of his students, painting it with pigment, baking it in an oven, and then washing it. That's one way. I don't know if he's tried it a couple of different ways, but he's, you'll find articles like on CNN, proves that it's fake. Do you know much about attempts at recreation, and what's your thought on them?
Yeah, there's a number of them. I'm not familiar with that particular one, although I can just address it superficially, I guess. But the most convincing one that I have seen is from a South African guy who I think his last name is Allen, and what he tried to do was think of a way that it's very clear that the image on the shroud has these photographic properties, but it's in a pre-photographic age. And so he thought, okay, so what would have what materials and know-how would have been around in the Middle Ages to be able to create like a proto-photo, as it were.
Proto-photo, I like that.
Proto-photo.
All right.
And so he took a linen cloth and he treated it with silver nitrate, which they would have had back then, and he created a camera obscura, a completely light-proof room with a tiny little hole in one wall, and he put a crystal in that hole, and then he took a body and he hung it about 9 meters away from the cloth and shone light on it, and that light reflects through the crystal and onto the cloth, onto that silver nitrate, for a number of hours or a couple of days or so. And then he flipped the cloth around, flipped the body around, got the backside, and then in order to act as a fixative, because this is really old school photography, to act as a fixative, they would have used some kind of an ammonia or urine in order to fix the image onto the cloth, and then you wash it out and you end up with a pretty convincing replica of the cloth. Now, the problem with that is, as clever as it is, and though all of that material was available in the Middle Ages, the know-how to do it did not exist. There is no example of anybody demonstrating any sort of knowledge like this.
You're saying the materials would have been available, but not the process.
That's right. And hold on, I'm like hitting keys all over the place here. That was gross.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah. But there's a book that anybody interested in this might be find helpful. It's called The Shroud of Turin: A Critical Summary of Observations, Data, and Hypotheses. So this is written by John Jackson. John Jackson was the leader of the STURP team in 1978. He's a PhD physicist. Everybody on that STURP team was highly degreed and highly specialized. And this goes through all of the evidence that was collected. And one of the interesting things is he goes through all of the alternate theories and the attempts to recreate it, the shroud, in a bunch of different ways, and he evaluates them. So you can see he does kind of a minimal facts type of thing. I'm trying to show you. He's got this chart. I know it's hard to read, but he's got this chart, and it has all the features of the shroud that need to be accounted for and all the ways in which people have tried to account for it. And they all fail, with one exception. The only thing that this PhD physicist says can account for all the features that you see on the shroud is radiation. That there was a very highly concentrated emission of radiation from the body that the shroud wrapped. And that is the only thing he can think of as a scientific explanation that can account for these things. Now, of course, that brings the obvious question is, well, when does a body emit that kind of radiation? And the answer is that it doesn't. So, but that's the best we got right now.
And so that's why that's part of what leads someone who believes in the shroud's authenticity to say it's not just any crucifixion victim. This would be Jesus, and this is essentially forensic evidence of his resurrection.
It could be. It's, the fascinating thing about the shroud is that it's incredibly compelling to some people, but there's always wiggle room. There's always reason to leaves a hole for denial or, poking a hole in. So.
Well, let's do a couple questions from the live chat, and as we end up, you got a little bit of time to look at a few questions. We'll try to do
Sure.
Quick answers and see what people say here. Jonathan C. says, but Yeshua's face was covered with a napkin, but the shroud is a whole body cover. I'm with the theory that Leonardo did it.
Leonardo. Well, let's say Leonardo did do it. Then you have an incredible miracle in play, because Leonardo lived about 100 years after the shroud has been dated.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Thamazo says, also, I don't think the Bible mentioned a bright light coming out of the tomb when Jesus resurrected. I think he's saying, like, how would you know there'd be radiation? I think that's what he's trying to say.
I don't hear anybody arguing there was bright light coming out of the tomb. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't.
Jerry W. says the face on the shroud looks like a 75-year-old man, not a 33-year-old guy.
Well, Jerry, who knows? A 33-year-old guy who's been brutally punished, beat up, and crucified. We don't have a whole lot of examples of what that would look like. So, sometimes we have to remind ourselves not to look at history with modern eyes.
All right.
So.
The Jordan says, how is his hair, beard perfect like that? I think they felt like it was just too well combed, too well groomed, or
too
something.
Well combed. Let's see. Let's go back. Let's see how well combed it is. Well, I don't know. I don't think there's enough definition to be 100% for sure that it's he's particularly well groomed. I'll tell you one of the interesting things about the beard is the way that dimpled beard is created is probably because of a chin cloth that is tied around his head to hold his mouth shut, and that tucks the beard back under his chin and then appears below the chin cloth a little bit as well. But it was probably a long beard and a little bit dimpled there as a result of getting tucked.
Somebody's asking, what about the chromosome count? Isn't that proof of its authenticity? I'm not sure I understand the question.
I believe that whole chromosome issue is from a different claim, and that comes from a pseudo-archaeologist named Ron Wyatt.
Oh, Ron Wyatt strikes again.
Yeah, he's from my neck of the woods here.
Oh, is he? I didn't know that.
He is. He's the Nashville guy. So, but he believed he found the Ark of the Covenant somewhere over near the alternate Golgotha.
I don't think Ron found anything.
He claims to have collected some remnants of blood and had it tested and found only half the chromosomes. So,
I've heard that clip. I didn't know. So I've
Yeah.
heard that clip. So Ron Wyatt to me was interesting, but I can't rely on anything that he really said for me, for what I've seen.
No,
But
I
didn't
believe
know
he's
that
totally
clip.
sincere but mistaken.
Yeah, I didn't know that clip was from him. Okay. Well, wait a minute. That does bring up an interesting question, though. If there's blood,
Yeah.
do we have the DNA of this?
There's not enough nuclear DNA in the blood that's on there to do any kind of DNA testing in the way that would be actually helpful.
Someone needs to make a super weird sci-fi movie where somehow we are able to get enough blood from this, and then some weirdo clones Jesus and something like that.
Isn't that like Jurassic Park, only
Yeah,
with Jesus
that's-
instead of a T-Rex?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Someone wants to know how tall is Gabriel, I believe, Brother Gabriel. Want to know how tall is this guy?
The man in the shroud is about 5'10" and about 175.
Okay, so that's tough because from what, unless you know different, from what I've looked into this, from research, from first century skulls they found of men from the Galilee region. So we've got a bunch of their skulls, and people have done recreations. The average size of those, because it's Jewish adult males, the average size of those guys is 5'2". So Jesus would have been like King Saul of his day if he's 5'10".
Yeah, there's a spectrum of thought of that, but he is tall, but not freakishly tall, is the best understanding I have.
All right. Hey, can you take over the show for a second? I got to check something outside here. Can you speak for a second? I'll be right back, okay?
Sure, okay. I can't see any of the questions as they come up, so I don't hear all show. How about this? Let's go to, I got a bunch of graphics loaded up. Here is a map I made of the route, what it would look like, and I've got the dates over there on the left. This is everywhere, starting with when the shroud shows up in Gascogne, France in 1349, that on down. So about the bottom half of that list on the left is historically documented, and the top half of the list is based on tradition. I do have Athens in there. That's the one question mark, really. It may or may not have been in Athens. And then you can see there is, I put a marker like halfway down Italy. And that's where it was kept during World War II. But otherwise, these are all the locations where tradition says the shroud was. So if you look over in the far right marker is where Urfa is, or Edessa. So there you go, if you think that's helpful. Let's see, what else do we got here? There's the wounds again. If that's helpful, you can do a screenshot or something like that. And let's see. Here is this is an example of doing a pollen test. This is a different cloth. This isn't the shroud, but this is the same test by the same people. This is they would kind of like in this case they're like vacuuming up a little bit of pollen, but the way the pollen was taken from the shroud was through a sticky tape. And the guy who came up with this whole idea, it was a criminologist in Switzerland who was kind of like a Sherlock Holmesy kind of guy, because he wanted to be able to place different suspects at as specifically as he could in different locations. And he realized that he could, one of the ways in which he could do that was to test pollen. You know how like Sherlock Holmes used to be able to tell you where you were, where you had been in London based on the mud on your shoes. This guy could figured out that he could place people in certain locations based on the pollen he found in the clothes that they collect. And so he's the guy. He comes down there and he just uses regular sticky tape, which freaked out a lot of the other scientists. But he was there at the 1978 investigation, and he just like started slamming down some sticky tape, and he was able to pull up the pollen that way. So.
Oh, my bad. I didn't realize you guys, I should have muted. You guys could hear me in the background. My bad. At least that's what Nate's saying. Oh, sorry about that. But okay.
Thanks. You were very polite.
Yeah, I guess. Thanks for taking over the show, though. I appreciate that. You did a good job there, my friend. And so we've seen a lot, and it's quite fascinating that we've been able to see here today, Doug. I appreciate your time and all your knowledge and expertise, everything you've shared. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for letting me come geek out about it.
Yeah, I can tell it's something you like. I can tell it's something you like. So what's going on next, Doug? You're always working on a book or some conference. I know we've got life's a little bit different in 2021, but you got anything that you should tell people about? Because I'm sure now after they met you, they really like you.
I'm working on a very short apologetics guide for core Christianity, Michael Horton and the White Horse Inn guys. And I have a series of novels, and the first one comes out in October, and they're all kind of biblical archaeology-oriented treasure hunt type of things.
Oh, really? What would be the age?
Da Vinci Code.
Okay, sorry.
Well, they're like Da Vinci Code, only everything in it is real. And the age is just anybody who likes that kind of stuff.
Well, that sounds pretty. That sounds like a cool idea. I like the idea of that. That sounds pretty cool. Man, that's what I mean. You know, you're doing apologetics, but you always have these creative ventures. You know, the massive books you've made, all the apps you've made. Those apps, are they still available in the App Store?
They are not, because I am not a programmer by nature, and I program those apps myself. And then every time Apple updated the iOS, you have to update the app, it's like, you know, they changed the way the operating system works every single time. And not being a properly trained programmer, but somebody who just kind of figured it out, it was like trying to climb an avalanche. It's never going to change. And so, but they all ended up becoming printed books. So we have that. And then awesome. Musically, been I had a couple songs on the last Alan Parsons record and got to sing on it, and working on some new songs for him.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw when the picture zoomed out, the guitars in the background there. Doug is a musician, ladies and gentlemen. That is epic. Well, it looks like Jonathan Green, it looks like he's got some of those, because he says, I love those books. So it's excellent to see people familiar with Doug's great work.
Yay.
And yes, indeed.
Thanks.
Yes, indeed. And again, DougPowell.com is how you find them, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I appreciate it very much, Doug. I hope to see you around, maybe at ETS or something like that sometime soon. I don't know what's going on, but it'd be nice to run into you.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Oh, then hopefully we do run into each other. Maybe we can do some more freestyle raps with Gary Habermas, you know. Represent Detroit, the 313, Detroit there.
But we're going to have to send him this link now.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to make a quick announcement to my people. So I got to tell them about what's going on tomorrow. But I greatly appreciate you coming on. And for now, I'll say sayonara. Sound good?
Great. Thanks, Vocab.
Hey, God bless. Thank you very much, Doug, for joining today. All right, check this out, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the announcement I have. Oh, man, I'm messing up here with all these extra things here. Let me get rid of this so I can... I'm making it worse. Just give me a second, people. Just give me a second here, people. Boom, there's that. And anyways, I'll fix this out. I got all these fake, guest logos up there, but it's not the end of the world, whatever. I could just leave it for now. Here's the announcement. Early morning live stream tomorrow. I haven't made a broadcast page for it or anything, but it's going to be approximately 9:30 a.m., which is a lot earlier than I do live streams. It kind of just happened together, got put together today. I'm going to be interviewing Oscar Dunlap. Oscar was recently on Apologia's show called Cultish, and he talked about being involved with Hebrew Israelism for 10 years or so. I'm not sure if it was 8.5 or 10, but almost a decade either way. And I talked to him today. We got it worked out. It's going to be 9:30. So for you guys on the East Coast, it's not really an early morning show. It's going to be at, 12:30 in the middle of your lunchtime. But if you are West Coast, it's somewhat early for a Saturday morning. So 9:30 a.m., 12:30 for my East Coast friends. I'm going to set it up right now after I get off here, okay? And it's going to be a little bit of interview about his testimony coming out of Hebrew Israelism into full-blown Christianity, and some of the responses he's gotten, because some Hebrew Israelites have made responses and made comments about him coming out of Hebrew Israelism. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. You do not want to miss this interview. So with that, I want to say thank you very much, everyone, for jumping on and hanging out and exploring a unique topic. And again, I'm a skeptic, but I'm a friendly skeptic. Doug's my man. But I'm still not converted into Turinism. But nonetheless, it is fascinating. And I appreciate him doing what he did. So I hope to see you guys tomorrow. And again, thank you so much, Doug, man. You did a great job. Didn't he do a great job? He did such a great job. Where's my applause sound? Where is that applause? We need that applause sound. Hold on, just give me 1 second. I know he's gone, but still. That's the crowd, all these different symbols here. All right, with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's say peace out. God bless. Shalom.
Turn your radio up. Whoa. Radio time. Whoa. You're now listening to Street Apologists. Street Apologists. Street Apologists. Street Apologists. On the radio. Street Apologists. Street Apologists. Street Apologists.